So if it was one or two people that said, no, he's going to push you all to the front of the room anyway, sit down there. To those one or two people, good on you. If you all just know that, then great as well. For those of you watching online, thanks for being here. For those of you that are watching the replay, thanks for watching the replay. What we're going to go through for the next 50 and change minutes is an outbrief of a deox. And for those of you that can't spell deox, we're going to spell it a little bit. We're going to talk a little bit about Daomi. There's always going to be time for your questions, comments, inputs, preferably on topic, but we'll take it on anything. And that number hasn't changed. It's on the bottom of the chart there, 707-412-8922. I'll take them in person live. You can actually talk to me live in person. I don't bite. Or you can text it in if you're here. If you're online watching right now live, you can text it in. We'll have somebody watching online. You can comment in your questions or comments as well. Why are we doing this town hall, and why am I doing this format for deox? For those of you that have been commanders, that have been SELs, that work in the equal opportunity realm, or the people business, as JD calls it, deox surveys are something that we are mandated to do on a recurring basis within our units, and it's a climate survey. That's the C and the S in deox. And then as part of the climate survey, we get a report as the command team, and we sit down with the DEIA, specifically the EO specialist that helps us with this, and we go through things that are highlighted because they see them all. They're all available to me, but I don't spend the time diving in deep that they do. So they highlight that, hey, here's the things that you ought to consider, and then I have to brief my boss, which I did earlier this week. We're going to send him a follow-up per his request. And I'm required to outbrief it to the unit. So this is checking the outbrief to the unit square, but it wasn't just to the small subset of you that had an opportunity to participate in the deox that had my name on it. We're going to actually outbrief all the deoxes that have happened in about the last 8 to 10 months at a high level, because I see some trend lines across the entire organization and across the entire wing, and if it's across the entire wing, it's probably across the entire installation. And so this is an opportunity for us to dialogue on that. Chief and I are going to try to pretend there's a nice warm fire right here, and you guys are around the rest of the campfire circle, fireside chat style. Everybody game to try that with me? It is a little chilly outside, so you can pretend you need to warm your hands anyway. And if you're virtual land and you have a fireplace, you're welcome to move to there and join us. So ready to go? Okay. Thank you for all being here, and thank you for participating, and I look forward to the engagement as always. Okay. So number hasn't changed. Area code 707-412-8922. Comments, questions, and anything else you want to get to us. Let's go to the next chart and talk about deox real fast. The history on deox is relevant. I'm not going to give you and then the earth cooled, and then there's deox. But DAOMI, the Defense Equal Opportunity Management Initiative, I think I'm close. Richard, is that? Yeah. So it's an organization within the Department of Defense that is charged with building a large data repository, and from that, they give out expectations or results or trend lines, and they're also the places that all of your data, anytime you or we take a survey, that's where your data goes. And so they're kind of a dual-hatted role there, and they have multiple other responsibilities that they take as well. And a deox is a DAOMI climate survey. So that's how the acronym works. The processes are on the slide. I think the slide, yes, behind me there. Hopefully it's showing up online okay-ish. But it's managed by the Office of People Analytics in the Department of Defense, and they recognize that non-attributable or anonymous data is a very valuable way to get information. There is often an opt-in bias to the data. So if everything's good, I'm happy, no big complaints, no big critiques, no big accolades, you're just going to sail on. That's the type of person that they want to try to get and often have the most challenging time getting. Mm-hmm. The folks that are either elated or really not elated are often the opt-in participants. So there is a bias inherent in the population of the survey, which is why we try hard for very large survey participation rates to work from the outside towards the middle. And so if you happen to be in that middle ground and you're wondering if taking a deox is worth your time and worth your energy, please do take that and know that it is worth your time, especially the comments that you make at the end. And Chief and I will talk about that here in a second. And so that's the value is, but I'll candidly say what's the risk. You're anonymous. Even if you type something in your comments that fully identify you, the EO shop and the Daomi team will strip that and not present it to the commander that the report is being issued. I've seen certainly into the double digits of these now, Chief. I'm sure you're the same.
Yes, sir.
I can legitimately tell you that I have never seen a piece of data in the comments section or in the demographics click-through that resulted in any way for me to identify who submitted that. Now, sometimes I can guess who that might be or who the crowd might be, but that is also not complying with the intent, and you can have full faith and confidence in the anonymity or the non-attribution of your participation in the survey. Chief's got a really good example from a demographic subset that she often gets asked, and I'll let her talk to that, and then talk to her how that's anonymized. And it's the classic small group number. I'm the only one of blah in my unit. So go ahead, Chief.
Yes, sir. So I actually put something in here to kind of capture that. If you're the only black female chief in the unit, that comment or those types of singling out or isolation results will not make it to the results that are going to then be presented. And as you see in these data points, the one that says if only 2 women complete the survey, women-only results will not be shown. So you have to have at least 5 participants respond in order for it to actually make its way. And so those kinds of things are in place to make sure that you are not isolated or easily identifiable, which is something that throughout my 25 years, everybody was afraid of, and they still are to this day. Not everybody. Some people are still afraid of to this day, so it's pretty cool that we're actually talking about this and dispelling some of those rumors and kind of getting after that part. So.
Yeah, so if you take a survey, you have to fill in the demographics before you can unlock the questions. The thing that we are trying to foot stomp to you, and more importantly, foot stomp to those of us that are not here today or listening online that kind of do that. I'm never going to take that survey because I don't trust the anonymity. Please communicate to those folks that it is truly anonymous, and know that the system behind that is well outside your chain of command. It's well outside of your service. It's in the Department of Defense, and your anonymity is protected at the utmost. And so that's an important part of the survey, and that is the most common reason we hear on why people don't or choose to not take the survey. And ironically, or sadly, maybe is another way to look at it, it's often those of you in your units that are the 1 or the 2 or the 3 of however you want to cut that in as they divide the population. Those are the ones that we desperately want to hear from and need to hear from. And so please continue to opt in with your time. Survey fatigue is a real thing, and we understand that. Mm-hmm. And so if you think you're being surveyed too often, that's something else you can put in the comments as well, or ways to make the survey more efficient. All right, I think I'll leave it at that. We can come back to this if you have any additional questions. Next slide, please. It's numbers. You're all extremely smart people. STEM, go STEM. And we're amongst geeks, those of us that are and those of us that closely affiliate with them. So you can see the numbers here. The first thing, there's 2 things that are going to jump off the chart at you there. There were 2 organizations that actually generated more people than they had eligible to take the survey. I'm told that's a natural artifact of an initial distribution of people that are eligible. And then as people start responding to the survey, they discover more people. So they don't reset the baseline. It's more people respond, but those are not double or triple survey takes. That should not be an option for you if you find that you can take the survey twice. I don't know why you'd want to, but if you can, that you can take the survey twice. EO really wants to know that so they can get it back to Daomi. That would be that'd be a fine or an escape in their system. So the 100 plus means they had very high participation rates for those 2 units. So kudos to both EWG and to TENG for hiding your troops well. For everybody else, one of the things that I'd like to really highlight there is that if you look at the number of folks that were registered, the largest number registered on the most recent deox and MSG was just shy of 1,000 people. So that 16% response rate means you're getting heavy, probably heavy at the tails, not a bunch of filling in the middle on the population level, but look at the number of responses, 155, that's the maximum number of responses on any survey. So the N, for those of you that are stats geeks, the N is very large, so there's robust information available there, but because the survey response rate is relatively low, you're not sure that you got the distribution across the population. So there's both a plus and a minus with large denominators and large response rates. The ideal would be 60, 70, 80, and maximum number of eligible. That would be ideal. And that is a challenge to get, but overall, I'm satisfied with these response rates, and you should be proud of that. I will tell you point blank that if you trip the 50% mark, you're doing fine, and if you have in the 100, 200 range, anything above that, you stay above 30% or more, you're making great progress. But there's your team, and these data, with the exception of one chart that Chief will talk about, these data are rolled into all of these charts. So this is the outbrief of that very top bullet. The test wing with 126 with 73 returned and a response rate of 58%. That's why we're doing this. But I wanted to get it to all of the test wing, not just the folks that took effectively what was a wing staff agencies and a couple folks that weren't covered by somebody else's survey in there, and that's why we're getting the other 8 organizations that have deox in the time frame that we're looking at. So good on us. Continue to do that. Continue to be genuine, and continue to spend a little time typing in some comments, because those are gold. Next chart, please. This is the format you're going to see for the next, I think it's 6 charts. It's a little bit challenging to read across the bottom, but I'll highlight them down the list. Let me get my old man eyes here. So think of your organization and where you fall, and I'll read them down the list by color, and they're the same on every chart. So the first one is that 126 members that responded to the, quote, test wing survey. The one below that is EWG. The one below that is CPTS, then CEG, then med group is the light blue bar on top of the purple bar, which is OG. The light green is TENG. The red, second from the bottom, is MSG, and the bottom is MXG. So think of where you are, and that'll be the same color in everyone. And if you need to do the pause or give me the decoder, or again, boss, we can get that to you. So what these charts are going to show are what we know, or what deox responds back to the commanders as protective factors and risk factors. And you'll see why they're labeled that way. The data that also get presented to us in the reports, actually, they're not binary. They're in 5 different categories. Some that are really, there's an awesome category and a really not awesome category. And I'll talk to where we were in the Midland, not good, and really not good categories on the stress factors, or the negative factors here in a second. But what does this data set in front of you, in front of us, say right now about the transformational leadership of the unit leader? So the person responding to the survey had to think about who's my squadron commander director, or if it was a group, who's my group commander director, and that's what they're thinking about for that person. This is assumed to be an affirmation or a positive thing, and you can see that overall across the wing, we have a very positive response rate about the unit leader as defined by the people taking the survey. So that should give you confidence, if you are one of those people, or you're on the command team with one of those people, that your folks believe that you are moving in the right direction at an appropriate source of speed with reasonable amounts of risk. But there's also room, if you flip that, for all of us to get a little better, or to communicate a little better, and also to take the constructive criticism and constructive feedback a little better as well. But overall, that's a positive impact and a positive piece of data. Does anybody have any data questions or data format questions before we go to the next ones? That's a legitimate audience here question, and online if you got one. Bernie, anything online on the format? Okay. Anybody? Okay. The next chart is also a protective factor, and this chart shows us something a little bit different. And it's the relative numbers are very informative, right? Are they decision quality data? Probably not, but they are very informative. So the previous chart, if you go back, was for the person taking the survey who they were thinking of for their unit leader. And now go forward again. And this is for the person taking the survey thinking about their, quote, senior NCO or their senior enlisted leader. And so you can see that there's one organization here that has a significant delta in there. Now, if you look at who that organization is, they don't have many senior NCOs, and so that would potentially be something that those squadron commanders or directors and the group commander would want to see. Does that correlate with something else they see in the environment, or does that correlate with what they're hearing in other places? And if I bet if they dug into the comments that were in their deox reports, they'd see some comments that would give them insight into what could be done or should be done about that kind of thing. But here's the value in the data, and this is one of the reasons. I didn't know this was here until we got the roll-up. I'm presenting to you the wing-wide information. And if you look with that, I'll say that exception, that's probably not a great word, but if you look at this, you can also see, again, as I said on the previous one, that we had some work to be done. There are, in Chief and her peer group, there's still some room to be gained and some ground to be captured in this transformational leadership as thought of or as graded by the members. Chief, anything you want to comment on this one or these two so far?
No, I think, like you just said, it's these survey results are always good insight into what we are doing well, where we need improvement, and I think that it's very beneficial, and especially when you get the outbriefing, you're able to take that for action and go dig into what that actually means. Again, you don't know who said what, but you can then just look at the culture and the climate of your unit and then go from there. So.
Yeah, one of the things that's relatively new, and I think it's new within the year, if not, it's no more than 2 years old. If the protective factors are not up where DAOME has decided arbitrarily they need to be, or the flip side of that, we'll see here in a second, the negative indicators are higher than what DAOME has said they should be, that automatically drives the unit command team, not the unit commander, but the unit command team to build and then implement a corrective action plan or some type of a generic get-well plan, and then they self-track it and work, and then there's an opportunity to do an additional survey after that and see if they notice any differences. Now, direct cause and effect is going to be challenging, but correlation can be very powerful.
And I think that goes to the point that you made earlier about why it's important that we get the most participation possible so that we have that kind of data to work with.
And that is also why when you're a new commander or director, you take your initial survey 30-ish days into the seat, and then you go into a normal battle rhythm and you can start to look at deltas across your command. Another thing that I have always done when I've jumped into a command job is I take the first one that I get at 30 days and I ask for hey, what was the last one my predecessor did? Right? Do I see a delta here over time as well? That's not necessarily to critique my predecessor, but was there a change in that period of time that could be explained by something else also? So good information there. Right, we are on the third protective factor, which is supportive leadership so go to the next chart, please. Supportive leadership for or from, I think is probably a better term there, all immediate supervisors. So the first protective factor was focused on the unit commander director. The second protective factor was focused on the unit senior enlisted leader, and now this is your first line supervisors. Again, the person taking the survey, whatever their frame of reference is. So I'm going to ask a question in the room, and I know there's a couple here. Who's matrixed? Who has more than one boss? Right? Yeah, right, Tim. Yeah, Tim's a great example. So Tim has to decide, if he took this survey, am I going to write this about this boss or this boss? Because you can't write them about both. And so it won't capture those data as accurately as we would like, but this should overall give a climate survey about how immediate supervisors are doing. And it does not differentiate or discriminate, no pun intended, whether that supervisor is civilian or military, or whether the member is civilian or military, because there's a 2x2 matrix there, so there's 4 options in this relationship. But this is for immediate supervisors. Again, what do these data say to me? These data say that overall across the wing, across all these surveys taken from across the wing over the last almost year, our first line supervisors are doing well to very well, but we're not perfect and we have some room to gain. And so that's what I see there. Right, let's go to the next one. This is probably, to me, in the protective factors charts, the most interesting chart to me, because there's a lot of diversity in the data. And I would love, and this is where, if you want to talk to us about it today, that would be fantastic. If you like to have small group sessions, or you want to do water cooler discussion with your unit commander, your SCL, or your supervisor on this, if your morale's not high, what could make it higher? Or in the past, what has been higher relative to now? Or what trend lines do you see? So there's a lot of granular conversation that this chart says is available to all leadership at all level, first line supervisor, all the way up to me and chief, and the rest of the wing command team. There's a lot of diversity in these data, and it would also be interesting to see amongst the leaders the command teams of these units, how do you assess your unit or your part of the unit's morale relative to others? And there's some opportunity for us to have at the leadership level based on this chart as well. If we were in a small crowd and I were out briefing this to a squadron or squadron-sized group and there were 10 or 12 of you, I would ask you questions like, what can I do, what can we do to help this? And so that's a question I'll open out to the floor now. You don't need to answer it immediately, but what are things that we are doing that are helping? What are things we are doing that are not helping? And then what are opportunities that we have to help with this? I have been a firm believer for many, many years, and I'll say multiple decades now, that the highest driver of unit morale is not parties. It's not down days. It's not even pay. It's mission success. And I go back in my career, and Chief and I didn't coordinate any of these comments today. I go back in my career and think about the times I've been in units with the best morale. It's because they've dominated in their primary mission set. And to dominate in your primary mission set, you need a lot of things. You need to be resourced right. You need to have the right leadership in place. You got to have the right training. You have to have a mission. People have to know what that mission is. And you have to be able to go out and do that mission.
Teamwork.
Absolutely.
All those things.
And that, to me, is the biggest correlator over my going on 3 decades. And yes, there's a lot of other factors around the way, but I think that, to me, is the biggest correlation with mission and morale. A lot of these other things are factors and can build to it, but at the end of the day, I think that's the biggest one for me. Chief, you got anything you want to reflect back from your 2+ decades as related to morale in a unit?
Sure. So I've been in a unit long time ago where what you just said was absolutely the reason for low morale. The mission success, or the ability for everyone to feel like they were empowered to do their part of the mission, was significantly impacted in a negative way. So then everybody, their morale as a result was affected by that. And like you said, if I'm part of a team and I'm not getting along with the team, or I'm part of a team who our mission is to do X, Y, or Z, but we can never do that, meet that, and get there for whatever reason, whether it's resources or what have you, that's gonna have an impact on the morale. And so there's so many other factors, as you pointed out. There's a lot of granularity that we can get into with this, but for this particular question, I'd be interested to see if Daomi could, kind of break that out a little bit further so that we actually know what these particular things are pertaining to. Is it the mission? Is it the supervisor? Is it, all those things?
Yeah,
So.
There's a lot of reasons why your morale may not be as high at an individual level as it could be, and I guarantee that's a different reason than the people that sit to your right and your left, and it may be different for you day to day as well. When I correlate morale to mission, and you're not sure exactly at your level how you relate to our mission, remember that we have 4 combat fronts. Those combat fronts have not changed since the pandemic kicked off, and before that it was only 3, but now it's 4, and that's going to be with us for a while. And those combat fronts continue to be prepare ready forces today to fight tonight, right? That is one of our missions at this installation, and if you have anything to do with anything at this installation, you are helping those airmen be ready to fight tonight. And sometimes that's a fight tonight in garrison, not just a fight tonight downrange. Our second mission that we are literally all fighting in right now is the fight in cyber, the fight in the cyber domain, the fight against the cyber domain. It applies on duty, off duty, 24/7, 365, on every device any of us touch, and candidly, any device any of our families touch, if those things ride on the same networks as ours do on a daily basis, right? That's a real fight, that's a real mission, It isn't just the comm squadron's mission, it isn't just the MSG's mission, it's all of ours. And so when we're successful there, things go well. When we're not successful there, like when the power blips, which was, oh, by the way, SoCal Edison outside the gate, affecting everything inside the gate today, that's an example of just how much we are in that domain. So that's the second fight we're in. The third fight we're in, it's the C word, it's the pandemic, it's the you name it. It is now endemic, it's transitioned to endemic. That has been a significant mission execution by all of us. Ain't just med group, certainly not just public health. But that's something that is not going away anytime soon, and you will have people impacted or affected by that, henceforth and forevermore, just like the flu, just like other communicable diseases. And the fourth one is our banner mission, and that's the modernization fight. A lot of you in this room and a lot of you hearing us do this broadcast are in that modernization fight. For those of you that aren't in it every day or every week or even every month, know that you're also supporting that, just as the modernization folks are as much today in the Prepare Ready Airmen today to deploy today to fight tonight as well. So those are our big four missions. I know you can touch or can see your contributions to at least one of those, because I guarantee you're all in cyber, and you can probably attach to at least one more of those, even if you think you're immune or immortal or whatever else from COVID.
To that point, I'm thinking about one of the questions where it asks if you feel valued as part of your organization or your team. And I think it gets to the tie or connection that everybody desperately needs to feel in any organization. And so that's often one of the questions or assessments of climate and culture is, do you know how you fit into the bigger picture kind of everywhere you go? And to your point of the 4 combat fronts, or at least the future and the current day cyber piece, I mean, we don't have to get into the endemic or pandemic piece to even get what I'm looking for there, but I think that it will continue to be a factor. And we have to continue to address that no matter where we are and no matter what we're up against, kind of deal. So,
the next slide should be fair treatment, protective factor and fair treatment. This is a large roll-up of a few questions. The outbrief gives us the questions and where people respond on there. And these are questions like, do you think that discipline is applied fairly and consistently in your unit? Do you feel that you're treated on a daily basis with dignity and respect? Those kinds of things. This is an aggregate for all of those. Again, as a commander, I look at these bars and say, there's a lot of room to be captured here. And then I flip that coin over and say, well, there's consistency or relative consistency across the wing, which means it may be an environmental thing or it's my fault, right? Because what do all these have in common? The wing command team, but in addition to the environment and the resourcing. But there's opportunity here, but there is relatively good reported performance or self-reported performance here. This is an example of the kind of data that would be super, super positively impacted because it would be more robust, it would be more powerful if we had higher or closer to 100% response rates. Again, as you recall, generically the people that are really not happy and the ones that are elated are generally the people that respond to these surveys. And if you start to fill in the middle, this data becomes a lot more targetable or a lot more granular. And that's where I think there's a missed opportunity because we didn't get the response rates as high as they were possible, even though I am pleased with those response rates. All right, next chart, please. An inclusive organization. I've got a chart here in a few that I want to talk about inclusion and other things like that. But this is a roll-up of more questions again. And overall, I see some spread amongst the subordinate organizations, but I am satisfied with where we are. But I also see, much like the United States itself, that we all are contributors into making it a more perfect union at the national level and a mo better unit at your unit and flight and work center level and everything in between, right? And so, and inclusion is not just measurable demographics. It's actually including thought, including background, getting to know people, and a whole bunch of other things related to that. So I think that ends our protective factor. That's our last protective factor that is outbriefed on all these surveys. So as we flip to the next chart, which should be the first, I'll say, risk factor, let this one sink in for a while. A reminder, those of you watching online or those of you in the audience that don't want to raise your hand or come up voice, 707-412-8922 is the number that you can text in a comment, a question, or anything else that you want us to get at. And we're going to go for the next couple charts here on what Daomi has called risk factors. This one I can personally relate to, right? As I'm sure many of you can as well. Raise your hand or text in if you're watching us online, please. Anyone that's in a work unit, a work center, that is 100% manned and 100% resourced and has no scheduled thrash. Yep. So there's going to be natural stress in there. To the extent that you think it is normal or trending worse or trending better when you respond to a question in this category, that's very valuable for your unit commander and your unit or your unit director and those up the chain as well. This also gets looked at by a team that just visited us in February, the IG team. So when they show up for capstone IG visits, they poll, especially charts like this, to look at what the force reporting in their deox match with what we heard in the ATIS to IG sessions and what we're seeing in other data sets in the resource component in the major graded area. Because often the source of stress is a resource inadequacy or a resource stress, and they report that back to higher levels, in our case, Air Force Materiel Command, and that was one of the findings from our capstone UEI, that we are under-resourced more so than a lot of our peer organizations and peer installations across the AFMC. And they got a lot of that from a lot of the deox surveys in addition to their ATIS G sessions and their one-on-one information. So you can have moderate high stress for other reasons too, but often that's a nice correlation to resource adequacy. Chief, any additional thoughts on this one before we go to the next?
No, sir.
Okay. So this one, the title, the title is off on the data, and so we have to. There's an issue in the survey response and how it reports. For example, Hugo, I know you're in the room. I'm not beating up on you or Mr. Judkins. This is frequent workplace hostility, and it's the frequency of it, and it's a reporting rate. But here's the issue when you look at these numbers. Obviously, none of us are at zero. So all of us, not just the unit commanders and command teams, have work to do, but all of us have work to do. And I've got a great comment that somebody sent in on our deox on how we can handle that at the lowest level as fast as possible. But remember I told you there are 5 categories of everything's really good, everything's good, meh, not so good, and really not good. These 3 categories, meh, not good, and really not good, are what aggregate into these data here. So as I dive into my data in these risk factors, I look at, yes, I've got people responding in the meh, not good, and really not good categories. Where are they responding? Is it in the really not good category, or is it in the meh category? Because they both get graded the same at this roll-up level, but that could be a really big indicator for me of crisis about to explode, or we're on the cusp of getting this risk factor completely brought down. And these are the kind of things that when you compare one DX survey to the next one and compare it to your action plan or your corrective action plan, did you move the needle? And so that's the value in survey data like this. I wish this were at 100% on the scale, but the charts don't generate that way sometimes from the tools. Overall, not elated with numbers that are double digits, and that was one of them that are those of you closest around me. But when I dive into the data deep and start to strip out the ones that are meh and look at the ones that, or look at the ones that are very bad, those numbers are extremely low, and we should be very proud of that. I'll give you an example of how we are. I know we are doing it a lot, and there was an example in the comments that Chief and I got that we'll talk to a little bit later that would tie directly to this. I know it goes without saying, but I'm going to say it on this one and the next 2 anyway. My tolerance, as yours as well, Chief's as well, for all this is 0, right? It's 0. My ask, especially on any of these, is that if you hear, observe, see, whatever, something that could be termed hostility or a harassing behavior, don't just take that and write a note and drop it on your deox. Let somebody know. And that's a big foot stomp that we'll talk about in the survey response free form as well. Next chart, please. The last two are presence of harassing behaviors. The deox sums it up in sexually harassing behaviors and racially harassing behaviors. For those of you that have been in the Air Force as long as I have, there's a real why behind us monitoring, tracking, and looking at sexually harassing behaviors. And that is that if you are a predator and you are in an environment in a sexually laced or sexually charged environment where jokes are tolerated and harassment is just the norm, that is an environment where you can operate freely. If you are in an environment where there is none of that, which is what we all should have in our work environments and with our workmates or our wingmen off duty as well, it's going to be very hard for you to operate as a predator. And that is one of the primary reasons why this is a very important piece of data to me. That correlates extremely high with what we've learned at a SAPR all these years. I'm looking at my SME in the room. Yep, and that's a huge deal. I remember having a conversation with that fine airman, gosh, it was 4 years ago, when the hashtag #MeToo thing popped, and I went, finally, we're actually making it a part of our conversation, our daily conversation. If you see it, if you observe it, call it out, sing it out in a safe way, quickly, to those that you trust. All right. Chief, I'll flip to the next one and let you hit this one, and then we'll get to some open comments.
The presence of racially harassing behaviors. Again, like you said, there's no tolerance for any of it, and so this hopefully drives conversations on all the slides that are going to be risk factors, drives conversations whether they are off the charts needing a corrective action plan or not, driving conversations, making sure people feel comfortable about the things that are impacting them as they do their day-to-day jobs. And so, yeah, the numbers, again, like you said before, you kind of wonder, and we definitely can't just ignore these kinds of things. We have to peel those back and dig into what could be going on, and then make sure that it's eliminated. So
yeah, and let me so here's my ask, and I'm not going to get on a knee and beg, but pretend that I am. Okay, my ask is that if you, and surely the numbers say that some of you are actually in this room today, and certainly you're watching online as well, and all of us work with people that answered yes. Hostility and harassing things, right? Don't suffer in silence, and make sure that it gets discussed or talked about. I'll give you a great example that has actually happened recently. I approached a member, so I had heard a couple things from some people that I consider to be extremely reliable sources. I approached this member and I said, hey, I would want to know if you had heard this data and I was the person. But because it's the other way around, I am professionally obligated to let you know. I'm not going to talk to your boss, but I think you need to know. And here are 4 data points. And in 3 of those 4 data points, the person that I was describing something that this member had done, the member was unaware that their action or inaction or comment was received in a negative manner. Right? So now ignorance is no excuse, right? And if you're complicit, you're complicit. But we owe it to the folks that do something or say something that could be interpreted negatively, and let them know. Not don't ever do that again. Not nobody say anything anytime all the time, but you need to let them know, hey, do you realize that when you use the term grandfathered, that may have some racial innuendo in there? Does anybody know that if I say you're grandfathered into this, that has racial roots? Does anybody know that? Yeah, for those of you that aren't shaking your head this or raising your hand.
And I think it's in AFI's.
Yeah, it is. It is absolutely.
Yeah.
And it goes back to the Jim Crow South. So if you would like to know more about that, I encourage you to ask about that. And if you hear somebody using it, say, hey, there's nothing wrong with using that term, but realize that there is, if you can say that in a different way, you won't have the risk of that depending on who your audience is and what your audience is. So that's an example. The other examples that I have, I can relate to you, but my ask of you is that if you receive information like that, take it as intended. Be true to yourself and make sure you're genuine. If you have the ability to provide that feedback to someone, either firsthand or around the way, please do. So I'm gonna do a mea culpa here, and it actually happened in this audience, right down in this room, right down there after the last town hall. A member walked up to me afterwards and said, "Hey, sir," and I outranked this person. I know that was shocking to you. I outranked this person by a significant margin, and that person walked up to me and said, "Hey, sir, I'm a little uncomfortable bringing this to you, but I think you need to know." Great. What do I need to know? You made a comment earlier today that referred to my religion that I was offended by. And I said, A, thanks for letting me know. Clearly, I wasn't intending to offend you or anyone else in that religion. And then we had a conversation that was, here's the message I was trying to deliver. Mm-hmm. How could I have delivered that same message and either been a little bit more understanding or without that risk? And so we had a perfect 2-3 minute conversation there, and I walked away better. I commended that person for having the courage to bring that up to me. And I also think he walked away better understanding that it was as much self, what is it when you beat yourself down? What is that? Can't remember the term. Yeah, self-deprecating. Thank you. Lawyers in the room, they can always help me with the big words. I had intended, at least in part of that, to be self-deprecating, and this member and I are of different denominations, both Christians, and he was not aware of either. So those are great opportunities, and that's an actual one that happened to me just 2 weeks ago.
I have an example of a racially harassing behavior. Well, not necessarily an example, but to your point about predators in a sexually harassing environment or behavior where behaviors like that are happening. There was a comment that caught my eye that said that jokes about white men were being thrown around. And again, if we're able to pick any demographic and accept that it's okay to make fun of that one, that's not gonna work. Because then you open up a can for potential. Same way if the sexual jokes are allowed, then you're creating an environment where potentially things could go left. So it doesn't matter if you're white, black, or any other ethnicity or race, it's not okay for any of it. So we have to be careful, and when we are excusing one thing and allowing one thing and then say, but you can't do that. You know, it's like, whoa, okay, yes, you're right, but we can't do any of it. So just to kind of give some context to how that can come across too. It's not just when one race is offended by some slander or some type of thing that, shouldn't be said.
So so often what happens, and Chief and I have taught a lot of classes on this, often what happens when we get into these topics is people either think they need to retrench or they're scared to say anything. That is not what we are asking you to do. We're asking you to have informed and professional and mature conversations, because Matt has lived a different life than this Matt, right? And there may be something that I say or do that triggers something that has a negative connotation for you, whether it has a basis in ethnicity or race or other diversity things or not. I would appreciate him sharing that with me, just as I know he would appreciate me sharing the same thing for him. I suspect that if Mike and I were to sit down and talk about both being a member of a religious minority, most of our upbringing, right, Mike? We would have a lot of things in common, even though he's an Orthodox Jew and I'm an Episcopalian. And that may not be obvious to Mike that I was in a religious minority until I left my hometown at age 18. And so there's a lot of great conversations available, but you gotta choose to be in there and you gotta be mature about it. And sometimes the topics may be contentious, but that doesn't mean you can't learn and shouldn't learn from each other, especially those of you that walked very different paths through life. Let's go to the next chart. These are the highlights that we got. So now a lot of these are a roll-up from the deox, all the deoxes. a lot of the specific comments are the ones, the 21 pages, by the way, 126 people, 58 responded, wrote 21 pages of comments for us. So, and Chief and I both read them all multiple times and talked about them for easily into the hours time frame. So thank you for doing that. And your comments get read, and your comments are definitely heard and extremely valuable. So none of these are direct polls to protect the writer. We have no idea who wrote them anyway, but here's some things. So I'll let you read the list, but I want to highlight that first one there, and I already talked about it. There was an actual example of that somebody wrote in the comments of a member in the work unit did something or said something that was offensive. And it probably wasn't lightly offensive, it was probably quite offensive. And somebody else, not the person who was the target of the comment or the remark, but a third person in that work unit, not the supervisor, but a wingman, a peer, a friend, a coworker, actually highlighted that to both of them that, hey, I suspect that probably wasn't great, let's have that moment. I know you all didn't like it for the years we had it, but what was that, folks? It was a blank dot moment.
It's up there.
Right? It was a green dot moment, right? You can directly engage in that, you can distract, or you can delegate. And that happened in real time. And do you think there was value to the person that was potentially hurt by that, or offended by that, or targeted by that? Absolutely, because that let that person know their wingmen have got their back, and that's going to make them stronger and more willing to do the same when they have the opportunity to do it as well. And it also let the person that said it know that we've got that person's back too, because if you're doing something out of habit, or it's just the way you've always done or said or tied your shoes, but that can be interpreted in a negative way, you need to be aware. Maybe you don't need to change, but you need to be aware of the potential implications or connotations of that. I'll give you a great example. I used to, at ALS, not ALS, at FTAC, right? When 3 jobs ago, when I would sit with the command chief at that installation and do FTAC, first-term airman's course. And I was always, if the class was small enough, I used to go through the crowd and say, tell me where are you from and what unit are you with, and give me a fun fact. And if I noticed they had a wedding ring on their finger, I would ask them a quick question about their spouse. And an example of something that I've always asked, so I'm going to pick on Sean here in the front row, who has a gorgeous little baby girl. Congratulations again. You're going to blink and she's going to be driving, trust me. Anyway, so Sean's an FTAC airman, so imagine you're a true striper again, Sean, and you walk in and you got a wedding ring on, and I say to Sean, hey, Sean, where's your wife stationed, or what does your wife do, right? That's not going to bother Sean at all, because I know his spouse is female. But there was an FTAC scenario where I asked somebody, what does their spouse do, but I used the opposite gender. And that person flat-faced responded, it was a female, and she responded, my wife is active duty and stationed at blah, right? So that is, and I didn't mean any offense by asking or implying gender there, but a more inclusive term is what I used. That doesn't water things down, right? And that is an example of, hey, I'm glad you're on the team and I'm glad you're here. When I saw that airman she was a defender, when I saw that airman at a gate a little while later, I asked her how her spouse was and is she getting along well in her new unit? And that was the closed loop of that learning moment for me. And since that point in time, I ask people open-ended questions, or a lot more open-ended questions, and I'm not fearful of it, but that's an example of something that I have learned along the way that you can as well.
Same thing happened to me as a squadron chief. Unfortunately, the member didn't feel compelled to let me know that it was same sex, and I later got approached by the supervisor and had to circle back and make sure that they understood that, but yes, then you learn as you go, and you start to tailor your message or your narrative or change how you view things, and your perspective changes and all that, and you just grow from it.
Yeah.
If you're allowed the opportunity, and sometimes
absolutely.
you're not.
And so what Chief just described to you was a green dot moment that she experienced a few jobs, a few assignments ago, right? And so that's another example in that top bullet.
Yep.
There's a few more there that I want to foot stomp. I'll foot stomp 2 more, and then I'll let Chief highlight any ones that she wants. But the second one down, there was a comment in there, and if you are on or you hear this recorded, please come talk to us. Right? There's a comment in there that I trust the wing command team, And gosh, if they only knew about this, I'm sure they would take action. Please, we can't reach mine. We have no idea who you are. Remember, this is anonymous. You're right. We would absolutely take action if we knew who you were and what it was. And if you don't trust the Wing Command team, that's okay. You can go to the chapel, you can go to the DEIA shop, you can go any place else that you trust and that you want to talk to about that. But if we don't know about it, we can't action on it. So thank you for writing that, and thank you for letting us know. And the command team at the Wing appreciated that feedback. But let us know and let us help out. So, and then the last one that I'll say was super valuable was the second one from the bottom. In the deox, the climate survey, we got multiple comments about infrastructure and electricity and roads and housing and the buildings and new MilCon and temporary facilities versus actual facilities. Mm-hmm. Thank you, right? That is hugely valuable for us because we can then attach that to other pieces of data and we can hand it upstream and talk about that is a thing impacting enough of people that it is impacting their time to take the time to write it on a deox survey. So hugely valuable there. And there's a lot more to that. Chief, any others you want to?
Yes, sir. I would think we should spend a few minutes on the special emphasis program support that is either happening or not happening across the wing. As we have volunteers that are highlighting the special observance months and days and events and things that go on, there are comments within the deox, and there are metrics that are within the deox that suggest that we need more participation in those special emphasis program type things, because that would allow us to highlight the things like grandfathered and the things that, you know, are in here because there's no other opportunity to discuss those, and that's where Hard Talks kind of comes in. But like, if those conversations are not happening, we're not going to be as successful. The Black History Month things or the African American history things, Women's History Month, if only women go to Women's History Month events and only Black or African American people go to that's not getting us any closer to bringing down barriers and confusion and ignorance. So as these volunteers are doing these things, the units, especially the units that those folks reside in, and then everybody else needs to support those things at the max extent possible. I know everybody can't break away. We're not even able to do every single event, but the amount of participation that's not happening right now is kind of unsat. And it's kind of, yeah. Yeah,
so one of the things that falls in the DEIA shop that Mr. Daly runs is they're the program manager for the observance months, and then they find volunteer committees. If you are a part of those volunteer committees, thank you. But most importantly, the volunteer committees are now charged with getting to the Wing Command team early enough that we can lay it in on the calendar and start to advertise and broadcast what yours is, where, when, and why, so that we can increase wing level attendance and participation and also make sure that it gets broadly communicated. And again, to Chief's point, you charge yourself with attending at least one event in every observance month all year, whether that's your observance month or not. I attend a lot, and you know what there's not? There's not a Man's History Month, and there's not a Caucasian History Month, right? And I still attend a lot over the time, right? So if you are in one of the demographic subgroups that are carved out, and you want to attend the one that is specifically that you fall in, fantastic. But also attend others. You're going to learn a lot as you attend others. I went to the Women's History Month event today, and I learned stuff, right? And I always learn stuff when I'm there, and so will you. So yeah. That's probably the biggest one there for those monthly things. All right, and we're taking the supervisor training one pretty seriously, and that's going to align nicely with other things that I'm participating in right now as well. All right, next chart. Chief, this is yours. I'll let you talk to it real fast, and then we got, I think, two, and we'll wrap it up.
So these two questions are the short answer questions that were only in our deox. They weren't in any of the other groups that we've been highlighting the entire time. So have you participated in a small group discussion? And to whom do you feel comfortable reporting an act of discrimination or sexual harassment? The numbers are pretty decent here, especially the second one. The small group discussion, it's kind of like what I was just talking about. You know, if there's not opportunities to talk about things that make people uncomfortable, I would hope for one thing that people would then take that to hard talks or, you know, find another way to communicate that. But I'm overwhelmingly impressed with the comfort level that people have reporting the things that we should absolutely not tolerate. And so I wish that was 100%, but like.
Yeah, it was a statistically significant response rate of the numbers that we got, and it was almost 90%. Yeah. And that's fantastic, right? Back to the first one, the small group discussions don't have to be about a DEI topic, right? It could just be small group discussions about anything. And you know, the AFMC Connect messages that all of us are participating in, those are examples of small group discussions. And small group discussions could be about, what do you think about the parity between NCAA men's and NCAA women's basketball tournaments and coverage, right? Right. That's a great small group discussion that potentially has a lot of learning available to each and all of us, and or anything else under the sun. But that's a super important thing, and we were pleased that it was, you know, the number was that large in our sample size of just under 60 people.
And we also, to that point on the second one, a lot of people were talking about the different helping agencies, so kudos to those teams that are getting out and making themselves known, and everybody knows where to go. It was very obvious in there that we are communicating those things, those messages well, so.
Okay. And these next two charts many of you have seen, but I'm going to re-emphasize them, and they're available if you want them. And Chief's Exec has them. The DEIA shop has them. So if you go to, so when my kids say, that's not fair, I say, so what? Life's not fair, get over it. And I mean that, right? And I also mean life is a team sport as well. But what we want is equity. And this is an example of equity across the bottom. Equality at a pure equality would be giving the same thing to the same person every day, all the time. Who's like a 7-footer in the room, nobody or even close, right? I think the bike is a great example, because that person would ride a very different framed bike than me. And the two of us would ride an extremely different bike than Dano, right? And all three of us, including Dano, would ride a very, very different bike than my 11-year-old, right? And so that across the top, that equality and everybody gets exactly the same thing all the time, every time, that's not what we're striving for, folks. That's a great step in the right direction, but that's not what we're striving for, because sometimes some of us need a little more, and sometimes we don't need a little, some of us don't need that. Equity is what we're striving for, and I think that's a great example and a great visualization of the difference between there. Whether you get the words right or not, the concept is what I'm trying to drive home here, and that's a big deal. So, and then the last chart there, I can spend 15 to 20 minutes or more interacting with all of you on this chart. It is a chart that we pulled from AFMC. It's called the DEI Continuum, and it's a continuum, right? This is a discussion of you're racist or you're not. Well, no, there's actually a spectrum of that, right? And so the most heinous example in humankind of race-based or negative things is the far left side of that chart. And if you can't read the box, on the far left side, there's very dark, and that's intentional. And the word in there is genocide. Nobody's going to debate that that's a bad thing that we shouldn't do. And then as you march towards the middle there, the last one, just before the midline there, is biased attitudes. So no one that I've worked with ever thinks genocide was a good thing, but how many people, including myself, have had or have known someone with a biased attitude? Well, I think that's about 100%.
Yes, sir.
So we ought to be aware of that, and it can be a slippery slope, especially if you are in echo chambers, and especially if you're an organization that is ripe for groupthink, right? You can slide down that slope really fast. On the right side of that chart, inclusion is not just a buzzword, it's an actual thing. There's verbs in there, but respectful curiosity. Hey, Chief, what's it like to walk through life as a female in our Air Force? That's a respectful curiosity question. And if she trusts our relationship, she'll tell me. And she'll say, I know it's really hard to be a test pilot. What is that like? And we can learn from each other. As you march out to the far right of that, cultural proficiency is the target. That doesn't mean that you need to avoid everything and be scared of everything. You need to understand where other people are, where they're from, what value they bring to our organization. I guarantee you that in Russia, but especially in the PRC right now, they are not talking about inclusion, right? They are not asking for diversity of thought, right? This is an asymmetric advantage that we have in Western society, specifically our country, but we have to actually take advantage of it. And how are 0.4 million or less going to compete and, if necessary, defeat 1.4 billion? 0.4 billion versus 1.4 billion? We're going to do it by using things like this and being proficient. Actually, and again, in the bottom, on the far right side of the chart, culturally proficient, to make sure that we meet everyone where they're at and we allow everyone the maximum opportunity to contribute in a way to our nation and our mission and our unit and everything in between. That is it. And that does tie directly into the deox climate surveys. But if you need talking points or you need to go to a place, this chart and the last one are ones that I use and Chief use all the time. So next chart, and this is our last chart. How do we take these data and what's our way ahead or what's our go forward? I encourage you, if you are one of the bars and you didn't fill out the survey under the 412 test wing one, but you filled out one of the other 8 surveys, go talk to that leader or that leadership team. I read them off. I'll have Chief read them off here again here in a second, but go talk to them. If you are willing to provide them the feedback or put a little bit more granularity around that, they want to hear it from you. Right. The next one is, if you have, at an installation level, at a unit level, or even a work center level, something that relates to a barrier analysis working group, which frankly is a little wonky of a term, but there are bogs at the installation. They're very creatively called installation bogs or iBogs. We have bogs at the MAGCOM level called MAG bogs, and we have them at the Department of Air Force level called DAF bogs, right? They are in multiple demographic bins or categories. They're not designed to be exclusive, but one that has been highly successful, and quite literally, the person on stage with me and many of you in the audience have benefited from what the WIT did and highlighted. If you don't know what WIT is, it's the Women's Initiatives Team. It exists at the DAF, at the MAGCOM, and at the unit, and it is a barrier analysis working group. And what is one visibly beneficial, as Liz grabs her ponytail, what is one visually beneficial thing that spun from a WIT? And it was hey, you realize if we have to pull our hair back this tight for this long, it can have a lot of pain, a lot of discomfort, and maybe even receding hairlines. And a lot of folks that made decisions didn't know that and wouldn't have known that if they hadn't floated that up through that barrier analysis working group. And candidly, that's not been a problem for me for a little while. Right? So even if the AFI allowed me to have my hair done. So that's an actual example, but there are dozens or hundreds and probably thousands that are yet uncaptured that if you sit in silence, we're not gonna learn from you. We're not gonna potentially value that. So if you can get to your installation iBog, or you don't even know if one exists, or you want to participate in one, let the DEIA shop know. And then my last pitch there on the way ahead is if you don't know about Hard Talks, and you haven't been paying attention, it is every duty day Thursday. It's in Chapel 1 Annex, and it's a safe space for you to come talk about things that you want to bring to the installation command team's awareness. I'll tell you what it isn't. It's not group therapy, and we are not licensed counselors. There's always a chaplain there, there's always a member of the DEIA team there, and there's always a representation of the installation leadership. And we are there to learn and listen. We're not necessarily there to take action, and most of the time we don't take direct action based on what you tell us, because we want it to be non-attributable and we need it to be a safe space for you.
There's the building.
And there's what the building looks like. There's Chapel 1 Annex. Jay Clark's house. Well, he would say it's Christ's house or God's house, but he's the steward, the groundskeeper. Is that Chaplain Clark?
He's a shepherd.
He is a shepherd at times, and his flock often needs some herding. But this is it. Our attendance rates have sometimes been double digits of folks. The last time, an example of a big surge of people that just needed to get something off their chest was after the Afghanistan withdrawal. That drove a lot of things that people needed to just vent, and this was a safe place for them to go. That was very valuable to me as I listened and learned, and there were other things along the way as well. Oftentimes, it's a handful or less of folks that are there, but we are always there. It's every duty day Thursday at 1500. We try to keep it to an hour, but if there's good conversation going at 4, we extend it as required. So that is our path forward. That's our way ahead. Anybody in the room have anything that you want to throw at us now or ask? I know we're slightly over, but I want to see if there's anything from online. There's one. Manny said, bring it out. Chief, any thoughts while I'm reading here? Thank you.
I would just say that, like I mentioned earlier, just to kind of foot stomp, even if there's no corrective action plan for any of the items within the report itself, all the unit leadership is very much interested and aware and moving out to see how we can bring those percentages in the direction that they need to go, whether they're protective factors or risk factors. And it's vitally important that we all know we should not be fearful of reprisal or retaliation or being singled out in taking these surveys, and we need to encourage max participation. And that would just be my reiteration from earlier.
So I'm going to say a few. So the online critique, the online comment was, I'll let Chief read it off. So thank you to the person that sent it in.
The comment says, as a morale improvement idea, how about wing PT once a quarter running in formation?
So formation runs, I'm all about in a 70% civilian workforce. That would be interesting to see, like a couple formations of civilians along the way. But that's the kind of stuff that if you think can work in your unit or larger units, and we can start to resonate on that on, for example, training days, or back in the saddle days, or items like that, or if you want a PT on a family day, that's highly encouraged, and put a group together. Those are the kind of things that are super valuable and super beneficial. Chief is actually working an event at a future training day.
Yeah, it's actually the Met Group First Sergeant's idea that I kind of am excited about, and I'm trying to push him to keep that alive and actually move out, since COVID kind of got in the way last year. So hopefully they can get that across the finish line and nail down a date.
And this would be something that we'd add to that potential list, and it was targeted on there. So the person that sent it in, great.
Yeah.
I'm going to end with thank you. So thank you for doing everything you do every day in support of our missions. We have a serious adversary that is competing very well with us right now, and the longer it takes for us to acclimate or adjust to the strategic competitive environment, the more ground they catch up, or frankly, the more ground we have to make up. Neither one of those am I happy about, because at the end of the day, I'm not really interested in my kids or grandkids being compelled to read or write in Mandarin, and I don't think you are either. If they choose to do that, fantastic, right? But I don't want them compelled to do so, nor do you. So thank you for doing what you do in support of that overarching long-term, decades-long, or maybe 100-years-long mission imperative. To do that, we have to do a lot of things. Like this event doesn't happen. So for everybody that's behind the screen today, from PA, for those of you filming, broadcasting, keeping the networks alive, keeping the electricity around, and helping us in the WinSlab, thank you. To Nicole for donating her actual live plant. Thank you. And to the protocol team for getting us the comfy chairs and the nice warm fire here on stage. Thank you for that support as well as our execs that drive the questions and answer and respond to all those as well. I'm proud to be here, very, very proud to be here, and happy to serve with you and alongside you here as we all make big progress and continue to make, test tomorrow's technology today at, say it with me, folks, the center of the aerospace testing universe. And I could not be more proud to be on your team. So with that, we're going to call the broadcast. If you want to, Chief and I are going to walk slowly up each aisle if you want to catch us one-on-one on the way out. But I appreciate your time, appreciate your attendance, and I appreciate everything you do. Have a great weekend, everybody.
Room temperature.
Carry on, please.